Clothing is both a comfort issue and a safety issue. You certainly want to be comfortable during the day when you're out and about on your camping trip, but you also need to take into account that the conditions with weather are always going to be changing during the day. It could start off really cold in the morning, warm up throughout the day as the sun gets higher in the sky, and then it'll start to cool down again. And then when you're sleeping at night, you're in a sleeping bag maybe, but especially if it's cold or if it's warm, you have to make sure that you're wearing the right type of clothing for those environments, because you don't want on the cold end to get hypothermia or maybe some sort of a heat exhaustion from too hot of weather. So with your clothing, the answer is layering, and that's always having enough different layers that you can take clothing off and take clothing on as the conditions change during the day. I'll just give you an example here of some of the things that I like to bring on my trip. For colder weather, I would start with having some type of a shirt on and then have a thin layer over that as the weather gets cooler. And then I've got kind of a mid-level fleece jacket that I like to wear when the temperature starts getting down, where it's actually starting to be really cold out. And then I have a heavy coat for really cold weather. And then I bring knit gloves, I bring a beanie, I bring like a gaiter that you can put around your neck, but also can be pulled up. At night when I'm sleeping, I might, if it's cold out, I might wear this beanie and the gaiter, which I could bring up, because the only part of my body that's going to be exposed out of my sleeping bag is my head and my face. So these two things are really good for that. In my day pack, I also bring a rain jacket in case it starts to rain so that my clothing doesn't get wet. And I also bring a puffy jacket that will really fold down, as you can see here, into a pretty tight little container. And that could also be used at the campsite if I prefer over a heavier jacket. Another thing to consider if you live in a cold climate is thermal underwear. Now let's talk for a minute about cotton. And if you start reading about what people are talking about in the camping communities, there is a strong bias against cotton, and that's because cotton really retains moisture. It doesn't wick it off like more of the other synthetic materials do. And that can be dangerous because once moisture is created, then it cools down, and in the wintertime, it can really move you more quickly toward hypothermia. So having a material that's not cotton is a good long-term solution for camping. For your first few camping trips, don't go out and buy a lot of specialized camping clothing. Try to select things from within your wardrobe, even if it includes cotton. But just be careful in the colder weather when you're wearing cotton. For cooler conditions, it's also good to bring wool socks, and they'll keep your feet warmer during the day and at night in your sleeping bag. As far as changing clothing, everybody has a different routine that works for them. I like to change into fresh clothing and clean up before I go to sleep at night. And then in the morning when I wake up, I'm already dressed for the next day to the extent of what I've done. So what I'll do is I'll take off the soiled clothes that I wore from the day, and I have a stuff sack for that, which becomes my laundry sack for when I get home later. And then I use wipes to freshen myself a bit on the face and parts of my body. And then I put on the fresh clothing, so when I go to sleep that night, I'm wearing fresh clothing and I've cleaned up a bit. And then the next morning, it's easy then to just get up and throw on the extra clothing that you needed to add after coming out of the sleeping bag, and then you're ready for the day. Many established campgrounds will have a bathroom, and if they have running water coming into the bathroom, they'll have sinks there and sometimes showers that you can use. You usually have to pay for the showers with a token that you can purchase, but you'll have to learn about how you pay to do the shower thing at the campground you're going to by looking up to see how they accept payment. So when the campground does have a bathroom with running water, then you can freshen up at the end of the day at the bathroom, brush your teeth, those types of things. Now the campground bathrooms have 3 types of toilets. It depends on the campground for which you'll encounter. At the highest level are flush toilets where they have the running water, and it's just like you'd use your toilet in any public restroom. Then the next level is the vault toilets, and those are basically like a toilet sitting on top of an enclosed container that gets emptied out every so often. And of course they're treated with chemicals so that you're not having a smell that's going on with those. And then the pit toilets are really just like a hole in the ground where the toilet's sitting on top, and then it feeds into that. And then for those, they also treat them with chemicals. If you've got people in your group that are not comfortable with using a public restroom like that, you can also buy these pop-up enclosures that you can set up in your tent site, and then they'll have like a little seat toilet that goes inside, and inside the toilet area you use bags that can be disposed of with your regular trash. Now when it comes to campsite safety, I would say the most important thing to be careful of is being when you're around fire, and that's usually on the cooktop gas stoves, and then also if you have campfire going with that. And so with adults, I think they're always going to be careful around those things, but be super careful if you're bringing children along to make sure that you let them know about the dangers of being near a fire. And in the case where you have a campfire and there's a fire pit ring that goes around it, which are metal, they heat up and they're super, super hot. So make sure your kids know about that as well. Same holds true with campsite tools like lighters, hatchets, knives, saws, those types of things. So be careful with kids and those items. Lastly, you'll want to talk to your children at the beginning of the trip about where they can go and rules for checking in. The next topic I want to talk about is gas appliances, and they're so convenient, but you do have certain things you need to be very careful of with gas appliances because they can be dangerous. Now, I'm not an industry expert, so I guess this is my caveat. I'm going to talk to you about some things that are just based on my experience, but you need to do your own research to either confirm what I'm saying or to come to your own conclusion. Gas appliances like cooking stoves or heaters run on a fuel that's either propane or butane or sometimes isobutane. And the manufacturers will design their appliances to work usually with just one of those three types of fuel. And you'll see that there are companies that are selling adapters so that if a device, for instance, is designed for propane, you can use an adapter to change the fuel, which in theory then makes it more convenient if you run out of a certain fuel to be able to switch to another one. But here's the issue. Each of these fuels operates at a different pressure. So for instance, butane is around 35 psi, pounds per square inch. Isobutane is around 50 psi. And then propane is a much higher pressure at between 125 to 175 psi. And so the manufacturers have designed their devices based on the pressure that it require for it to run effectively. If you use an adapter, now you're relying on that device to change the pressure to the proper one for the appliances you're using. And frankly, I don't feel comfortable relying on that, and there are a number of people who agree with me on that, but then there are other people that are like, oh yeah, just use the adapter, it'll work great. And then you have that flexibility. I just don't want to take a chance on something like that. So that's my view. Now there are some gas appliances that are considered to be multi-fuel, and that's where a manufacturer has actually designed the product to work at two different fuel types. So in that case, the manufacturer has given you their approval to do that, and that's a different situation. As for camping heaters, which you would likely use in your tent at night, you have to be careful because when the fuel burns, it produces carbon monoxide, which is a poisonous gas. You can't see it, you can't smell it. It's just a silent thing that can actually kill you if you're not careful. So there are a number of rules that you need to go by. You want to keep the area in your tent well ventilated, and because you just don't want to have a buildup of carbon monoxide in your tent. If you're operating a gas heater that operates on propane, I would recommend getting a longer hose, and so you can leave the propane tank outside the tent, and then when it comes in, Of course, you need to have the ventilation there for that. Some of the heater devices that you purchase come with a built-in carbon monoxide detector, and so that's a really nice thing. If the heater you're using doesn't have a detector, you can buy those as a separate product. I own one for my small heater, so I turn that on, and then that's going to warn me if there is a carbon monoxide buildup that's starting to occur in the tent. Now also keep in mind that heater that you've placed in your tent is producing super warm heat. So you have to be careful of where you're placing it. I like to use a little small table that has a metal surface, so that does insulation. You can buy insulated pads that are fire resistant. You don't want to have your heater too close to anything else like the wall of your tent, which it could cause the material to start to melt. You just don't want to create a fire in your tent. The other thing is I wouldn't put it too close to you when you go to sleep at night. If you're a sleeper that moves around a lot, you don't want to like knock over the heater and then come in contact with the floor of your tent, and then you've got a bad situation happening there. So heaters can be a nice convenience, but it does come with responsibility. So be very careful about not knocking over your heater, and also making sure you have good ventilation for it, and a way to detect if there is carbon monoxide buildup in the tent. So when it comes to cooking with a gas appliance that also can create carbon monoxide, it's best just to never cook in a tent. If you have to, I mean, I've heated water for coffee and things like that in the doorway to a tent where I have awesome ventilation going on to the outside. You need to follow the same rules with cooking as you would with a heater. And the last thing is lamps, like kerosene lamps and that sort of thing. They produce carbon monoxide. It's best to never use a lamp that heats with oil inside of a tent. Another safety area is if you or somebody in your group gets an injury of some type. And for that, it's always good to bring a first aid kit to at least deal with the minor things. And I'll do an episode where I'll go into what I actually bring for my first aid kit. But you can buy a small kit with gauze and tape and some bandages and things like that I think I got one for like $10 on Amazon. So there, you can get a pretty cheap one to have. But when you're out in a more remote location, you want to be able to deal with a certain level of injury that could occur. You'll also want to bring some moleskin, maybe for hiking, and burn gels, and people that are on your trip, anybody on your trip requires medication, you'll want to make sure that you're bringing that on. Now, as far as campsite security, when you're out and about during the day, if you leave your campsite to go on a hike or get in the car and go somewhere for a few hours, you'll want to bring your important valuables with you, of course, or keep them on yourself or locked in your vehicle. As far as the things that you're leaving behind at the campsite, I've not ever encountered an issue with my camp chairs and my camp stove and things in the site. People are pretty good about not going in each other's sites, so that's just something that I don't really have a concern for, but you'll have to make your own decisions about what you feel comfortable leaving in your site when you leave. And that's if it's completely vacated while you're away. When you go camping, it's extremely important to plan well and to have good backup plans in place. As you gain experience and get more comfortable with the different procedures you're going to go through while camping, you're going to get better and better at things, and then they're going to become second nature to you. But what you don't want to have happen is one or more types of problems happen on a camping trip, which then discourages you, you get frustrated, and then it's really hard to enjoy your trip. If you've planned well and everything's in place so that you have backups for different situations that happen, then you can focus on just having a good time on the trip. And if a curveball does happen, like you're dealing with a minor injury or the meal didn't turn out as well as you'd hoped, you can deal with those curveballs a little bit better when you're not also in the midst of a lot of cascading problems that are happening. Here's a list of the main things to prepare for on your trip, so if something unexpected happens, you can deal with it. Now, before you leave, is your vehicle gassed up fully, and has your vehicle been serviced recently? Bring an extra set of car keys and store them in a different place from the primary set that you're going to be using. I like to bring electronic jumper cables that I keep in the back of the car, and I also have an air pump for my tires, and I have a plug kit. And again, it's only because if you're going to a remote area and you encounter some sort of an issue, you're not having to call to have an expensive service come in to take care of your vehicle. If your final destination is remote, like up in the mountains or out in a desert location, be aware of where the last place is where you can fill up with gas, and plan to make sure that your tank will get you to your final destination and back in range of that gas station. And if you need to, it's best to fill up at that final gas location so that you don't encounter an issue during the rest of your travels. Bring more food and water than the exact amount you think you're going to need on the trip. It's very easy for something to happen where all of a sudden you need a little more food, and then that way you don't have to go off the campground and out to some sort of a store miles away in order to replenish. Does the campground have water? If not, make sure you're bringing enough water for your needs during the trip. Is there a nearby camp store or grocery store so that if you realize you forgot the marshmallows to make s'mores, or you need to add more ice to your cooler during the trip, then you have a good idea of what's involved with how to get to that place to get those things taken care of. Bring plenty of the fuel types that you need. I use mainly propane, and I'll bring several tanks of that on the trip. You don't want to run out of fuel so that you can't cook on the trip. When it comes to making a fire, bring multiple ignition sources, lighters and matches and things to get your fire going, but also bring multiple types of fire starters so that you can always be able to get your fire going. And I covered that in a previous episode. My main tent that I use is a pretty large 4-person tent, but I do also have a 2-person tent, which is pretty small footprint. I take that on all of my trips, and I leave that in the back of the car just as a backup in case something catastrophic were to happen to my primary tent. I talked about layering, so bring multiple types of clothes, bring rain jacket, those kinds of things are good to have. If something gets wet on the trip, you want to make sure you always have extra clothing so that you can continue to stay warm and you can stay dry. Does the campground where you're staying have cell phone reception? If not, you'll need to consider that. Before you leave, set up an emergency contact and let them know where you're going, especially if you're traveling solo, and have a check-in protocol with them. Bring enough charging blocks for your electronics. I rate my cell phone at the highest level. If I'm just out for a few days, that's not a problem. But if I'm going to be out for 5 or 6 days, the only way to recharge your charging blocks would be through your car while it's running. So you'll want to keep the priority on your cell phone typically. I also use a lot of LED devices for lighting, but most of my LED devices will go for up to 4 or 5 days before they run out of their charge if I keep them on the low settings. So that's not usually a problem. But I do bring a few battery-powered lighter lamps and also oil lamps so that I have those that I can also use if my LEDs are all running out of their power. Also bring some tools for basic equipment repair. If you're bringing an air mattress, you'll want to have, and they usually come with them when you buy them, but you can bring a patch kit. I have a little patch repair kit for my tent. My tent has a couple of Phillips head screws to it, so I'll bring a Phillips head screwdriver. Then there's knives or hatchets to help you to process wood, and I'll do an episode on what I keep in my toolkit, but you'll want to have just a basic level of things in order to deal with any kind of maintenance that might come up on the trip. In the next episode, we'll cover logistics, what to do before, during, and after the camping trip. And if you are enjoying this episode, please press the like button, consider subscribing so that you can keep up with all the new episodes as they happen, and I'll see you on the next one.